Letter 5. Crossing Bridges. Dear Lady Mary, and so I headed off for that land of talking stones and bridges in the summer of 1978. My impressions of that first visit are not sharply described in my carnet de voyage. I have a feeling that I was so overwhelmed that it was difficult for me to document it all. However, I do distinctly remember being very excited when I saw my first pencil minareted mosque from the airplane upon arriving in Istanbul, as your Constantinople is now known. What was your first impression of this pearl of a city, Lady Mary? You describe your first encounter 259 years before mine as follows. We arrived the next evening at Constantinople, but I can yet tell you very little of it, all my time being taken up with receiving visits. Our palace is in Pera, which is no more a suburb of Constantinople than Westminster is a suburb of London. All the ambassadors are lodged very near each other. One part of our house shows us the port, the city, and the seraglio, and the distant hills of Asia, perhaps altogether the most beautiful prospect in the world. A certain French author says that Constantinople is twice as large as Paris. One of the strongest first impressions on me was, of course, the Bosphorus Bridge, the first one, which stood alone at the time, because my Fata Bridge had yet to be built. It was a glorious thing to behold, its dramatic sighting and span so similar to the Golden Gate or Brooklyn bridges in my country. It was only later that I experienced firsthand the pride that the Turks themselves felt towards this bridge. On a subsequent visit to Turkey, I stayed in Suadiye on the Asian side with the family of a friend I had made. One day, they announced that they had a big surprise for me. Back in those days, my comprehension of Turkish was not all that strong, so I was not quite sure what was in store for me, but I was game. Uncles and aunts, a few young cousins, my friend, and I all piled into an old Chevy and headed out. It was a snowy and freezing cold winter day, so I was glad for the warmth of the 8 people piled into the car. This was a time of penury and extreme difficulty for Turkey during the martial law winter of 1980, so I knew that spending gas for this trip meant that it had to be something very special. After starting off, they announced to me, "We are going to drive you across the Bosphorus Bridge. We want you to soar above the strait like a bird, so that you can see the ferry boats from on high, and you can feel what it is like to cross from one continent to another." They were so very proud to offer their guests this experience, and I was fairly speechless, for they had no idea of my personal relationship to the Bosphorus and bridges. And if you thought, Lady Mary, that the vista from your house was altogether the most beautiful prospect in the world, you should see those Asian hills from atop the bridge at 105 feet in the air. And so I crossed my first bridge in Turkey. In that rattletrap car with a bunch of enthusiastic Turks, I made a significant, symbolic step towards the rest of my life. I experienced the thrill of being a part of something bigger than myself. Something that pulled me as if by magic strings. After crossing that bridge, things were never the same. I started off on one side as a visitor, a tourist, and got off on the other side as something more. When I was first living in France, I walked home one night in the raking late October evening light. On that fall day in Paris, the tone of that dusk light on the Rue du Bac distilled in me a moment I will never forget. Suddenly, I saw things very clearly, and I knew that I belonged in that place. I felt a sense of ownership. I felt accepted. I felt that I could find my place there. I knew I could grow there, that I would be accompanied along that journey, and that I would be invited to participate in its life and allowed to give of myself. I knew that I had somehow a right to be there, a right to finding my happiness there. I loved Paris, and it showed its love for me in return. I felt the very same affirmation when I crossed that Bosphorus Bridge. Much like myself over the years, Turkey is always questioning itself, growing and stretching. Turkey has been a bridge for me, a safe place above waters both calm and turbulent. It serves as a constant reminder that I am crossing to somewhere, and that I am always between two banks, the one I am, the one I could be or am becoming. Crossing bridges teaches me to organize my path through culture, both there and at home, and to research my own character against the different backgrounds of others. My life has been touched by Turkey, and I have touched Turkey by mine. And I keep traveling there and crossing bridges to understand this constant emotional connection that binds my shore to that other one. To this day, crossing a bridge is still a thrilling moment for me, and there are many bridges in Turkey to cross. Not just those two outside of Adrianople that you crossed, Lady Mary, or the two Bosphorus bridges, but hundreds of other ones, built over thousands of years, by Romans, by Byzantines, by Seljuks, by Ottomans, all built to link together the arteries of this crossroads of communication, cultures, and trade. I make it a special point on my travels to seek them out and walk over them. When I cross them, ever so slowly, I absorb the strength of their stones through my feet. I reflect on all the people, famous and infamous, plain and fancy, that have taken the same steps. Donkeys, peasants, travelers, warriors, kings, sultans, and dervishes have all crossed over them before me. I have crossed some remarkable bridges. The bent Agri Kupru on the outskirts of Sivas, where Kongal dogs frolic on its banks. The 13th century Ok Bridge in the middle of bustling Ankara. The long 13-arched Kesi Kupruluhan. The 12th century Artukid Maladabi Bridge, big as a dam. The 6th century Byzantine Dichla Bridge outside the city walls of Diyarbakir that can be seen from outer space. And my all-time favorite, the tiny Seljuk Bridge over the Yeşilırmak River in Tokat. That bridge inspires me by its beauty, setting, simplicity, and its message. 3 competing brothers for the Seljuk throne managed to put aside their feuding for a moment, for the time it took to build this small gem, linking the new north-south trade axis of their kingdom. So let us too, as rulers, citizens, and nations, take time from our feuding to build some bridges to cross together, one foot in front of the other. Sincerely yours, Catherine Branning.